everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Board. Today is Tuesday, February 18th, and it is 9:30, and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board members and staff. To my left is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo. To her left is Board Member Sean McGuire. To my right is Board Member Tam Doduk, and to her right is Board Member Laurel Firestone. Sitting today at the executive table is Michael Loffer, our Chief Counsel, our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, Chief Deputy Director, Jonathan Bishop, Eric Oppenheimer, Chief Deputy Director as well, and we have Janine Townsend, who's our Clerk of the Board, and assisting her today is Courtney Tyler. I'll quickly go through our evacuation procedures. Please look around and identify the two exits closest to you. In the event of a fire alarm, we are required to gather up our valuables and evacuate this room immediately. We are to evacuate to Cesar Chavez Park, which is across the street. Please obey all traffic signals and be careful when crossing the street. I also want to let you know that this meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please speak into the microphone when you come up. And most important item, please be sure to turn off all your cell phones or devices insofar as their ability to make noise. We start off every board meeting with public forum, and we have no cards. Public forum being an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on an item not on our calendar. I will move on to then board item number 1, which is consideration of the minutes from the January 21st board meeting, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it carries, and the board meeting minutes are adopted, although it was a little dicey there for a moment. We'll move on to our uncontested items, still uncontested. Item number 2 here, which is consideration of a proposed resolution authorizing the executive director or designee to approve a change to California Trout Incorporated's Elk River Sediment Remediation Pilot Implementation Projects for an implementation project to a planning project, and amendment number D1513103 as necessary to reflect this change. And so, no thought or consideration from board members?
I wanted to
before
drag
adoption?
out the suspense a little.
Good. Let's.
Move for adoption.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It carries. And thank you for staff for your work on the item. Next, we'll move on to item number 3, which is from the Division of Water Quality, and is the consideration of a proposed order on the general waste discharge requirements for disaster-related wastes. Take a moment here as staff gather up. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. My name is Sahan Rastagarpour. I'm a water resource control engineer with the Division of Water Quality, and I'm here to discuss the general waste discharge requirements for disaster-related wastes. I will provide a brief overview of the purpose of this general order, stakeholder concerns, and the staff recommendation. As we know, catastrophic events such as fires, floods, landslides, earthquakes, and other emergencies have the potential to create large amounts of disaster-related waste. Emergency response actions may result in unusually large amounts of waste needing to be disposed of in a short period of time, and may involve waste that would not normally be accepted for disposal at a waste management facility, and often require temporary staging areas. Discharge of waste to land in the state of California is an action that is subject to restrictions adopted in individual or general waste discharge requirements, or WDRs, or waivers, which are issued by the State Water Board or Regional Water Quality Control Boards. During emergency or disaster conditions, there's generally limited time for those performing cleanup of disaster-related waste to prepare a formal report of waste discharge and for the water boards to prescribe new WDRs or to revise existing WDRs. All 9 regional water boards have adopted waivers for disposal of disaster-related wastes, which expire every 5 years and require additional staff time to renew. As shown on this slide, disaster events such as fires are becoming much larger over time, and small nuances between the regional water board requirements may result in unnecessary delays in response to these events. Due to a lack of consistency, there may be further delays in cleanup responses, even if they are the same requirements but in different waivers. This order addresses that issue by providing consistent statewide requirements and also removes the logistical issue of a disaster happening in one region, but the nearest disposal facility being located in a different region. So far, we focused on known disasters such as fires that necessitated cleanup responses, but we know that potentially larger disasters loom ahead. As we know, models have shown that a large catastrophic earthquake may impact the entire state of California. The model shown here on this slide was developed prior to the Ridgecrest earthquakes last July. Reminders such as this demonstrate why a statewide order is critical in emergency planning to expedite and streamline the response process. This general order has requirements for final disposal and regulated landfills, including only allowing final disposal in composite lined cells and incorporating the disaster debris in a manner that doesn't impact the functionality of the leachate recovery and monitoring systems. The general order also has requirements for temporary stockpiling of solid waste and temporary service impoundments for liquid waste. There are also special considerations for handling of mass animal mortalities. This order is available to use in the event the governor declares a statewide emergency. However, we have specific considerations in the event of a local emergency. An example of this is when a water main ruptured near UCLA and flooded most of the campus, which resulted in the disposal of cars, books, various electronics, and hazardous and non-hazardous materials. This was not a governor-declared emergency. Instead, the mayor of Los Angeles declared a local emergency. The order has different notification requirements for both instances, but still expedites the process for emergency response. Water board staff received comments generally focusing on the applicability for inert debris fill operations at temporary staging at gravel quarries, closed landfills, disposal to sanitary sewers, and the general application process. In response to the comments on inert debris, if material is identified and classified as inert debris and can be segregated, then the material is no longer required to comply with the provisions of this general order. Requirements for inert debris fill operations is outside the scope of this general order, and there is no requirement for inert debris to be disposed of in classified waste management units such as landfills. Regarding temporary staging areas, at closed landfills, this activity is allowed as long as it meets the conditions in the proposed order. Permanent disposal is only authorized to cells at landfills with a composite liner system. There was also a concern that this order authorized discharge to sanitary sewer systems. This order only authorized permanent disposal in composite line landfills and does not authorize any discharge or connection to sanitary sewer systems. Additionally, the proposed order was revised to reflect the notice of termination process for both completion of disposal and permanent waste management units, as well as completion of use and restoration of temporary waste management areas. State Water Board staff recommend adoption of the general order as proposed. Thank you for your time today, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or thoughts from fellow board members? Janine, any comment cards? I'll just say that, when it comes to disaster response and, again, having actual staff at this point, being able to focus on this work has been incredible. And I think that it is some of the most important work that we can be doing. And, whether, to your point, if it's wildfire debris removal and response, earthquake, or other disasters, We need to be able to better streamline and engage with emergency response personnel. So, and having, again, dedicated staff at this point to really start to just run through and better standardize, and this work being reflective of that. Our role in response is just really needed, particularly before we find ourselves in wildfire season again, or should an earthquake, as Californians we know, always being around the corner, strike. So really just appreciate the work. Any other thoughts? Vice
I
Chair?
just wanted to make a comment. First of all, thank you all for really moving this through quickly. And I'll just share with my colleagues that after the fires in Santa Barbara County, I was able to participate in a tour that Region 3 put together, and I was just really overcome by the collaboration, not just with the regional board, but with all of the other permitting authorities that were involved in coming together to move the sediment that had clogged up a lot of the waterways, and it was just an overwhelming amount of work that had to be done, and to just be out there and witness it. So I just think that this effort is an important piece, but it's a big challenge overall. And so I just thought I'd comment on that. And again, thank you very much. With that, I'd like to move this item, unless there's other comments.
No other comments for myself, if anyone would like to second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries and item is adopted. Thanks again to staff for the great
Thank
work
you.
on this. Great. That brings us to item number 4, board member reports.
I can go for board member reports. So I was fortunate enough to get a tour of the LADWP Prop 1 groundwater program that they're doing, and was really struck by being able to see both the groundwater treatment, cleanup, water supply, and stormwater intersection in person. That was really helpful for me to understand better how local agencies are really, using more integrated plans to bring all of those pieces together. And then I wanted to mention that GARE, let's see, I have to, I always forget that name, the acronym stands for, but basically is hosting a racial equity summit here at Cali, PA. There's going to be a morning panel that I know Chair Esquivel is going to be on, and I was trying to make sure that I had the date, but now I just lost it. I don't know if anyone else has it. March 8th. Is that right? Okay. If it's not March 8th, I will let you know the details, but it's here at Cali PA building. And then also just that we're having our advisory group meeting for the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, or our SAFER program, tomorrow in Fresno. And looking forward to that second meeting. And that's it.
Just really quick, it's March 9th.
Two things. One, I'm glad Mr. Gore is here in the audience. I was able to attend the CV SALT Executive Committee meeting last week, and was really impressed by the level of engagement by everybody involved, and learned quite a bit about different things. But one of which that I'll be following up on and wanted you all to be aware of is the Office of Public Participation is putting together some, what I guess it was called general practices for community engagement as part of the CV SALT process on the early action plans as well as the management zones. And obviously, we all have a great deal of interest in that, but the discussion at the CV SALT meeting was geared towards the very strict timeline that they're operating on getting these early action plans together, and how to do that while at the same time conduct meaningful community engagement. So they are very much looking forward to receiving these general guidance from OPP, and I'm very interested in seeing what those general guidance are and how they may be applicable to other efforts that we have going on. And I wanted to make sure Ms. Sobek, as well as the new OPP director, know that the Executive Committee for CV SALT is really hoping to be able to discuss those guidelines at their next meeting, which is March something. I don't have the exact date. So to the extent that we can make sure that that is accomplished, I don't want us to become some kind of a bottleneck for things moving forward, especially on these early action plans. And then on a different note, I'm very pleased to report that the employees, not the board, but the employees of the state and regional water boards are now volunteer stewards for Mile 3 north of the American River Parkway. If you drive across Del Paso 160 and look to the right, if you're heading away from downtown, that 1 mile section is ours, and we have the responsibility of doing cleanups, of taking care of invasive plant species, and a bunch of other things. And Ms. Sobek, Mr. Laufer, Ms. Loudon, and I did a site visit last week, and we're going to be planning a couple of site cleanups, as is per our responsibility, and I would encourage everyone to keep watch for the announcements and to please engage.
I'll go next. And just first and foremost, thank you. And thank you to Eileen Sobek as well, the executive director, and Michael Laufer. I know staff quickly kind of pulled together and was able to make this happen, and excited to be able to engage. You know, driving through that on the 160 every day, often remarked to my partner how it really is one of the most troubled stretches on the American, and so feel very good about being able to contribute in a meaningful way as employees of the state board to a space that really needs it. And so I just appreciate that opportunity that the board member and staff have pulled together for us. I'll start and say that on Thursday of January 23rd, I was at the Federal Water Users Conference, Contractors Conference in Reno, Nevada. And Department of Water Resources Director Carla Namath and I were there on a panel regarding the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and its implementation. It was a very candid conversation, and certainly a lot of concern in the Valley as SGMA is implemented, a lot of questions and concerns, and certainly was an opportunity for the director and I to be able to talk about our shared roles, our agency's shared roles and responsibilities in the space of SGMA, and really the importance ultimately of locals being successful, and how committed we are to seeing local success and being partners in that. And so it was a good conversation, and appreciated the opportunity and the invitation. On Monday, the 27th, I was at the Verity Exchange conference in Los Angeles. I was actually on a panel moderated by former board chair Felicia Marcus, and also and it was the two of us, and in addition was someone from the Southern California, I think Water Association it is, but spoke about the resiliency portfolio, this administration's attempt and work plan really to synthesize what was a lot of incredible thought from the previous administration and the California Water Action Plan, and then certainly, as we know, a number of programs that have been passed since then, and laws like SGMA and our drinking water program, the Safe and Affordable Fund, and our SAFER program, and being able to have a really interested crowd and wanting to understand how we are seeing all these pieces fit together and seeing our workload ahead. So I appreciated that. I was then on February 5th, on Wednesday, at a forum on lab accreditation held by the NELAC Institute, and was able to connect with an incredible group of laboratories. These were labs from out of state, but over half of the attendance was from those labs here in California that have already been accredited through TNI or are looking to do so, or looking to explore and understand that community of laboratories out there. And it was a nice opportunity. In it, I was able to talk about just the general need to continue to, because our labs are our front lines, just innovate in the space, how already our laboratories deliver to us digitally their data, and continuing to look at ways of improving that whole sort of data enterprise, if you will, with our labs, I think is going to be really critical as we continue to combat emerging contaminants of concern, PFAS or other things, where our labs are our front lines in evaluating and assessing the state of our waters. There's a couple of other things here. I'll just quickly mention that I was then on Friday, February 7th, at a seminar on water affordability. It was at UC Riverside. It was put on by their policy school, and Kurt Schwabe from UC Riverside, who had done some work with Eastern Municipal Water District on their rates and some analysis of their affordability, presented, and was just and there were incredible students, which were my favorite part, and who were really engaged and motivated around the messaging on ensuring that access to clean drinking water, imbibing clean drinking water is sort of a central pillar to health, and making sure that students have either filling stations or know and trust the quantity or quality, or rather not necessarily the quantity, but at least the quality of their water is kind of key and central. And so it was a really great student group that was represented there as well, and a really good discussion. I will just finish off by saying that on Friday, I was at Mojave Water Agency's Water Leaders Academy that they had in Victorville, and so was up in the high desert with high school students. I will say that as I was standing up there, and I did my poor attempt at connecting on a very personal level by mentioning that I was a millennial, I quickly realized that they had all been born after I graduated high school in 2000. And so I don't think that really even gave me anything other than maybe just some weird looks. And so I really did appreciate the opportunity, though, to try to talk up this work that we're all involved in here, and the incredible opportunities that are there for the taking. One student, she asked me, what are the solutions to climate change? To that, I had to say, I was actually here hoping that you were going to be answering them for me, and invited her to come and help answer, how are we going to respond to climate change here at the State Board? But that was a great opportunity, and appreciated it. With that, that's enough of a summary of, I guess, it was a month of public engagements, so thank you.
Can I just say, now you know how we felt when you mentioned about, I guess, being in grade school, when we were discussing an item that the board had taken?
Middle school, but in 1995, the last time the Water Quality Control Plan was updated, I was in the 8th grade.
I don't want to say where I was in 95. Okay, on January 23rd, I met with an Australian delegation of agricultural associations that were out visiting California, and they were hosted by the California Farm Water Coalition. We had an interesting discussion about our water rights system and also our regulatory system and in terms of environmental flows, and a very good discussion. Boy, I was surprised they know a lot already about our system, and so we had a good discussion about the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan and some of the work that's being done toward potential voluntary agreements. On the 31st of January, I wasn't able to attend, but called into a San Joaquin Valley Water Managers meeting. This is a meeting that a couple times a year Congressman Costa puts together, and attended by the water managers throughout the San Joaquin Valley, as well as there were 3 members of Congress there, and many members of the state legislature as well. And Secretary Crowfoot did a really good job walking them through all that's going on. There's a lot of angst in the community, of course, because of SGMA and the Bay Delta Plan, and Secretary Crowfoot talked a lot about the biological opinion, the state's operations permit, the ITP, the Bay Delta Plan, and the voluntary agreements. And so I think that he did a really good job trying to the extent possible, update folks on the many discussions that are going on, and just encouraging them to support their managers in some of the discussions that are going on regarding the voluntary agreements. And then on, let's see here, February 6th, I attended Region 1's board meeting, and I was glad that I was there at the presentation of their Water Quality Stewardship Awards, where they recognized a number of community members for their efforts throughout various watersheds. And it just really hit home for me, all of the collaboration that's going on in Region 1 in terms of we are looking at these massive voluntary agreements, but they have a lot of voluntary efforts that are going on in the watersheds in Region 1. And so they recognized a number of participation regarding that. And then the board adopted a WDR for forest management activities for Green Diamond Resource Company in Humboldt, and they had previously adopted one for the other big player there, Humboldt Redwood Company. And this is on the Elk River, and together with the 2 WDRs, working toward action for their TMDL for sediment control on the Elk River. That's it.
All right. I had to go back to my calendar as well and figure out what happened over the last several weeks. But on January 27th, I spoke at the California Irrigation Institute conference here in Sacramento, and it was a good opportunity because it brings together both urban and agricultural parties who are interested in, better utilizing our water. I was able to talk about the water resilience portfolio. They were very interested in hearing about that. So I thought it was a good conversation. Then there were also some staff presentations in the afternoon on the water use efficiency regulations and how those are being developed. So good discussions there. On the 7th, I went to the Santa Ana Region 8 board meeting, and again, talked about the water resilience portfolio. You'll notice the theme here. And but also spent some more time talking about PFAS, just given the prevalence of PFAS issues in Orange County, affecting Orange County Water District, and the fact that just a couple days, or maybe even one day prior, the new announcement about the response levels had just come out. So I find that to be a helpful ongoing conversation that we're having with the regional board members as they're interested in both the source site investigations that are going on, but as well as the impacts to drinking water. And so that's a good ongoing dialogue that we're having. On the 10th, Chair Esquivel, you were there with me. We went on a tour with East Bay Mud of the McCollum River and their facilities. Went and saw the Freeport intake on the Sacramento River, and then we were able to go up to Comanche and Pardee reservoirs and see the hatchery that they have on the McCollum and some of the restoration efforts they have on the lower McCollum area. So again, it was just a very educational day. If you haven't been on that tour, I'd encourage you to go at some point to see what they're doing on their river. I've now had the chance to go on many of the different tributaries over the past year, and it's always just really encouraging to hear about the types of efforts they have to balance, the water demands that they have, along with protecting species, and the McCollum was no exception there. So it was a good conversation. And that's it.
Great, thank you, everyone. Ms. Sobek, item number 5, our executive director's report. Anything to highlight or that you would like to particularly mention?
Yes, I did want to mention that the first item that was released, which is the procedures for the discharge, the dredge and fill proceedings, that those were noticed. That did go out for public comment. I think it was noticed on Friday, or a notice went out today. The dredge and fill procedures. Yeah. So this is the guidance document. I'm sorry. This is the guidance document that it's going out in draft, and there'll be a public comment period. So this is following up on the direction based after your adoption. The regs themselves will go into effect at the end of May, but we have I think you've all been briefed, quite a lengthy and elaborate set of rollouts and trainings, and both for staff, state and regional staff, and for members of the public. And the first step is putting this guidance document out for public comment, and we'll try to get that finalized as soon as we can.
I know when we adopted, there was, and this is I better served for discussion later, I'm sure, but there was some back and forth regarding, I know there was a lot of desire from folks, although the provisions were specific to dredge and fill and wetlands, that there are other definitions that folks wanted to sort of see pursued. Is there thought yet on what sort of our priority or timeline might be on some of those? I only bring it up because of obviously movement on the federal side and continual erosion from the federal, although we're protected here in the wetlands and dredge and fill space, there are other waters that equally may be worth considering sort of having our own definitions or procedures around.
So first, let me say that no matter what the change in definition for waters of the U.S., waters of the state are protected. We have the general procedures. The next phase of the dredge and fill is to look at riparian streams. But I will say we're not planning to do that until we get the wrinkles and the rollout of the wetlands, because it's pretty much a full-time task to get that out and going. So we'll report back to you after May when the procedures are out and when they take effect, and see where our workload is under that.
That's helpful.
If I could just elaborate, we are, one of the things we are looking at is for areas that used to be covered both by our procedures and by the federal regulations, and perhaps were captured by a core, not general permit, what are they? Nationwide permit, that if there is no longer a requirement for federal coverage, and therefore they're not covered by a core nationwide permit, but they still are covered by our process, and for certified nationwide permits, that would have made it considerably easier to get state coverage if you were already covered under a core nationwide. We're looking to figure out how big that space is and whether we can do something to make that easier, because state coverage is still required. But, we're still scoping that out. We've had some preliminary discussions with the Corps. So we'll be looking at that and trying to figure out whether we can, what has changed. What we know hasn't changed is state coverage and state requirements, but whether some of the streamlining that came in to the federal process is not now captured in the state process, we'll be looking at that and trying to figure out how to capture that.
That's helpful, thank you.
And I believe in my briefing, we talked about that staff's going to be putting together some basic information that could be put out on this issue. On the issue of waters of the U.S. and the overlap. There just seems to be a lot of confusion out there, and when I had my briefing, I felt a lot better after just walking through these issues.
Yeah, so we are going to be including that in the discussion at the trainings that we're giving both to regional board staff and to the public to reiterate essentially that that the application that you would have given to the Corps is essentially the same application that you give to us. We have all that laid out in the procedures and explaining how we're going to address that.
Thank you for the executive director's report, and I appreciated having some time to read through it. I do have actually a question on page 1 as well, and that's on the SB 205 stormwater business license requirements. And so I'm very excited about SB 205 and the fact that there's an acknowledgement and understanding that there are many industrial facilities that exist, particularly in the really dense urban areas like Los Angeles, that aren't enrolled under the stormwater industrial general permit. And so this hopefully will provide a mechanism to address that issue by requiring those parties to in order to get a business license, to show proof that they're enrolled under the permit. My concern is the amount of work that might come out of this, and just I've heard different estimates that there's several thousand to tens of thousands of facilities that might fall under this grouping. And so all I ask is that we be mindful and kind of watch what's going on here as this new requirement starts to take effect, and just if for example, the Los Angeles Regional Board gets inundated with this type of workload, just find ways that we can assist them with that.
So we are asking our stormwater folks to keep track of the numbers as they come in, keep track of the time. We'll be, we've had discussions with the administration. We will be using that information for future discussions on resources.
Any other thoughts or comments on Executive Director's report from fellow board members? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Sobek. And we have a closed session item from the Division of Drinking Water, which we will now retire into or go.
Yes, so there is one disclosed closed session item, and that's what the board will be meeting on. I guess does the board have a preference for taking a slight break until 10:15 for staff to get set up in the conference room?
Yeah.
All right. Then we will
10:15.
recess to closed session and do the appropriate disclosures afterwards.
Right. Thank you, and thank you, everyone.